I'm a transgender woman, so I knew from a very early age that there was something different. I didn't know what it was called, and I didn't know there was much I could do about it. I'm always really clear. I did not drink because I'm transgender. I drank because I'm an alcoholic. When I arrived in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a militant atheist. I mean atheist of the worst kind. I read religious texts so that I could argue with religious people. The overcoming it came just by going through the steps. The fact is, I saw in the rooms a possibility. These people were saying you could live happy, joyous and free without alcohol.
Hello and welcome to 12 Steps and 12 Questions. My name is Silvio and I'm an addict. This pod is full of personal and inspirational stories of recovery from addiction. And in every episode, I'll ask each guest the same 12 questions about their life, addiction and recovery. Quick warning, there will be some graphic descriptions and a healthy amount of swearing. For this episode, please welcome Andie. Hello, dear listeners. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of 12 Steps and 12 Questions. Before we get to our guest, Andie, just a quick reminder. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, and I welcome all 12 steppers. I've noticed a tendency in most of us to undervalue our own story and our message. But then, how are we reaching those who need to hear our story? And if this sounds like you, then reach out to me, please, on 12steps12questions@gmail.com to work your 12th step and help me work mine. The email is also in the show notes. And with that said, Andie, great to have you here. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Andie. I'm an alcoholic from Shaftesbury in Dorset, and my sobriety date is the 28th of January 2022.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's get straight to our question one. Our question one is, did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
No, my childhood on the whole was pretty happy. I had great parents who are still with me today. I'm very, very blessed. On the whole, my childhood was a very happy one. I had no reason. The only thing that I knew from a very early age was that I was born in the wrong body.
Right. Okay, so let's just for a second stop there and introduce your recovery bird. Would you like to tell us about your recovery bird? I love the story, and we hear her every once in a while. So let's give her the role she deserves. Yes,
you are going to hear from Skittles today. When I was 4 months sober, I felt that I was ready to look after another living creature, other than a plant, maybe. And I'd kept birds before, and this it just all fell into place. And this lovely little green-cheeked conure came to live with me, and has been a huge part of my recovery journey. And I'm really glad she's never had to see me drunk. She always gets looked after, and she likes to speak up now and again.
There you go. And, she should have her rightful place on this pod. Might as well just pay tribute to my own recovery dog, which is called Riesling. It's a miniature dachshund. He is called Riesling after mine and my wife's favorite wine at the time. It was very clever at the time. Now he's my ironically named recovery dog. So let's get back, though, to the bombshell that you dropped after saying that you had a really happy childhood and absolutely no adverse childhood experiences. And then you said something really, really profound, which is that you were born in the wrong body. Would you mind expanding on that?
Yeah, sure. I'm a transgender woman, and so I knew from a very early age that there was something different. I wasn't in the right. I didn't know what it was called, and I didn't know there was much I could do about it. I grew up in a very different time than we live in today. And when I grew up, everything in the media about trans people was very negative. It was always sex change, freak or monster. And I didn't want to be any of those things, And that was the only thing that I never told my parents, because I didn't come until much later on in life. They know now, obviously. But that was my one thing that I had. But I'm always very clear, because I get asked to speak at a lot of LGBTQ AA meetings. I'm always really clear. I did not drink because I'm transgender. I drank because I'm an alcoholic.
Of course. And it's really, really so vital to make that distinction time and again, no matter, what your personal backstory might be. And, I think we come from we come in all shapes and sizes, colors, and everything, don't we? So it's really important to make those things clear. Now, I think it's part of the human experience to sometimes not want to live in your own skin, right? And wanting to get out of your own skin. I think that's part of the human experience. I can't begin to imagine, though, what it must be like to be born in the wrong body. And even though it might not be strictly speaking related to alcoholism, I would still, if you don't mind, if you could talk to us a little bit about what that experience was like for you. Yeah.
I went to school and I never felt I fitted in. I didn't like any of the sports boys did. But I kind of had to fit in. I realized that, if I hung around with the girls, I was going to get picked on by boys and stuff like that. So, it was one of those things where I just did my best to fit in and very much was one of the more outsiders. I had a little tiny core of friends. And that's really how I went through. Like I say, back then, everything in the media about it was negative. And I just didn't believe it was possible for me to be myself and come out and tell anybody. And so when I hit 12 and I knew puberty was coming and it was already starting to show up, and I figured, well, this is it. Just got to roll with it. This is my life. I don't have a choice. And I will admit that for many years, I used my male privilege, because such a thing does exist.
Of course.
To climb career ladders and things like that. But I was never really happy.
How does that show up? Is it an interest in, and forgive me if I say the worst thing possible, the worst things possible now, but how does that show up? It's surely more than just an interest in women's clothes, right? It must be so deep within you. How does that show up?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think clothes is the first thing that I think clothes and makeup are the things that most people, that trans women, pre-transition, things that they experiment with. And I did when I left school, and I didn't go to university. I did a college thing with and some work, and then I got a part-time job, so I had my own money coming in. And then I had a little bit more freedom, and I had a motorcycle I could get around on. And so that opened things up for me to go and have opportunities to dress as me, even if it was only for a few minutes, which gave me some, but yeah, it's a really strange thing. And I don't think anybody anyone that feels fine with the gender that they were born with will never know what it's like. And that's fine. I know that.
Yeah.
Just like people that aren't alcoholics don't really understand alcoholism. It's the same thing. But my whole thing is I've never tried to pretend to be anything I'm not. I don't worry about I know I have a deep manly voice. That's fine. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. I'm not dysphoric about that. I just want to be the most authentic version of me I can be.
That's really amazing. Thank you. And if it is anything, like you say, if it is like being an alcoholic or an addict, I know how pointless it is sometimes to try to explain to a civilian what the alcoholic experience is like, and I don't blame them either, right? It's hard enough for us, right? The whole podcast, we make podcasts about it, we go and speak about it, we share with other alcoholics. It's the whole point, right? How to engage with one another, and that we find it difficult sometimes to get our own heads around this, never mind people who don't suffer from it. So that is something that I can relate to. Thank you for sharing that, Andie. So our second question of the 12 questions is what did the moment you first got hooked, what did the fun times look like? So here you are a young woman in a young man's body, and that is a big struggle. And at some point, drugs and alcohol come into your life, or maybe just alcohol, I don't know.
Yeah. Predominantly alcohol. Drugs haven't been a big part of my story. I have dabbled here and there, but alcohol, I took my first proper drink at 13, and it was a real ale. I didn't like the taste. It was horrible. But boy, did I like that effect. It was like, now when I look back, it was like having a spiritual experience, right? Really. And at the time, it was like I felt I had suddenly discovered the secret to life. This was everything, this magic elixir, this magic thing. Suddenly I felt more confident, even if I was stuck in the wrong body. I could handle myself better in social situations. I could play the part of the guy that I was method acting, really. And that was good. And I loved it. And I thought that was it. All my problems solved. And the first few years of my drinking were great. I loved every minute of it. I partied hard, I had a great time, and I was quite often able to but obviously over time we find that sweet spot gets smaller and smaller and then non-existent, but we still keep chasing it. And I chased it for many, many years. So that was the early days.
I don't think it's a great mystery that we use drugs and alcohol, amongst other things, to uphold a false sense of self, right? And perhaps in fewer people is it so obvious than in your case, where you are upholding not just a false self, but also a false self that is of a different gender.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know how to be a bloke, right? So I just looked at blokes and went, I'll copy that. And so I just happened to copy all the ones that were in bars drinking because that was... So I just fitted in. I became a lad. I became, and so there was a certain part of that. The fact is, what I understand now is that as an alcoholic, I hate reality.
Yeah.
So I drank to change my perception of that reality. It didn't change reality. It just changed my perception of it. And then I was sober up and reality came back. So I'd drink some more. And it was that vicious circle that I got myself into.
A typical weekend then in those days, what would that look like? You'd get started Friday afternoons and party on, or?
I think in my very early days of drinking, my early teens, it wasn't daily drinking because I had fairly easy access to alcohol. My parents ran an off license at the time. And so I could get hold of the stuff. But I didn't, I wasn't drinking loads of it, but it was, I suppose, mainly a weekend thing. I'd have some beer, I'd have something else, and I'd, be on my merry way. And then as soon as I was earning my own money, I was really off to the races because now I had money coming in and I would go with guys after work and stuff, and we'd go to the pub. And this is before I was 18, before I was of legal age to drink. So, I worked in IT and we had some very nice equipment and we made fake IDs and we used to then be able to go in the pubs. And so I was drinking in pubs from 16 without any problem. So it was a party back then. Everything was fun and nothing. I didn't really have any responsibilities either back then. I was still living at home, my parents, so I was earning money and I was giving them a little bit towards rent work, but I had a reasonable amount of money to blow on alcohol. And that was my big thing. My bravado throughout my whole life was always, I can afford my addictions.
Yeah, that sounds strangely familiar to me, actually, I have to say. It is something that I prided myself in, even though I don't know how many quotation marks I would need for that. But absolutely. It's like, hey, look at me, not doing anything wrong, right? It's just, if I want to damage myself, that's just me. I can pay for this, back off. Yeah, it sounds very, very familiar. Question 3 is, what were your worst consequences and finally your rock bottom? So obviously this may cover quite a long space of time, but how did your illness progress?
So by 23, so I've been drinking 10 years at this point, and it was pretty much daily by that stage. And I was waking up in the mornings, still fully dressed from the day before. I hadn't made it to the bedroom. Empty spirit bottles strewn around the floor that weren't empty the night before. I was crawling over to the phone, calling into work sick, hanging up. And then by 11 a.m., it was like, well, hair of the dog, start drinking again. And I thought maybe this drinking thing's getting a bit out of control. So I called AA, looked up the number in the phone book, called, and someone phoned me back and said, there's a meeting in this town tonight. Can you come? So I said, yeah, okay, I'll go. And I went to my first AA meeting then, and I went in without an ounce of honesty, open-mindedness, or willingness about me. I honestly went into that AA meeting to prove I wasn't an alcoholic. So I did what we're told not to do. I listened for all the differences and not similarities, and decided that I wasn't as bad as those losers and I wasn't an alcoholic. And I did hear at that meeting someone mention something about if you can not drink for a year and it not be a problem, I didn't remember the second part of that statement, then you're probably not an alcoholic. So out of spite, I left there and I didn't drink for 18 months.
Oh, wow.
I went cold turkey. It was horrible. Every day was miserable. I couldn't wait I had to do more than a year to prove that I'd done more than a year. So 18 months seemed a good figure to hit. Of course, the moment I hit 18 months, I was off again. And so...
I mean, self-will or what?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had ridiculous things that have happened along my journey. I had a stroke in 2014 as a result of my drinking. Then doctor said to me, we're going to put you on these tablets and you cannot drink on this. So I didn't for a few weeks, but I'm an alkie. I can't help myself. So I ended up drinking on them anyway. And I've had suicide attempts along the way. And I got forced back into AA in November 2020. Via mental health. I'd had a pretty much complete breakdown. And I did an at-home detox during COVID with the family I lived with at the time.
What do they look like, those at-home detoxes? What's that like?
It's pretty much, it was a rapid tapering off.
Mm-hmm.
And then really it was like living like a prisoner in your own house. My family, they wouldn't let me go anywhere alone because I could get alcohol. They wouldn't. Every parcel I had come into the house was checked in case it had alcohol in it. I mean, because I'm an alcoholic. I was devious. I could get out. And so the detox really, and this is that whole thing that we know, no human power is going to fix this. So, I had that family begging me to stop drinking. But I think the doctor's opinion in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous calls that frothy emotional appeal. So I've had all those things. And then what happened in there, I got sober, but dry. I was going to one AA meeting a week because that's all mental health made me go to. And I did the bare minimum. It was during COVID, so it was on Zoom, turn up, put camera on, wave at them, turn the camera off. I did listen, but I wasn't actively participating. I didn't do anything I was told to do. So what my family found was that sober me without a program was just as intolerable to live with as drinking Andie was. So they kicked me out. And I was homeless for 3 weeks. I still didn't drink. And then I got my own place again and I still wasn't drinking. But you know what? I'd moved county. And in the UK, if you move county, one mental health department doesn't talk to another. So no one's checking I'm going to meetings anymore. No one's checking I'm doing anything. I don't need them, do I? I'm all right. I just won't drink. And I'm going on and life's actually starting to get better again. You know what that calls for? Celebration, right? Because I'm not an alkie. I bet I'd be all right having 2 beers on a Friday night. And the interesting thing for exactly one Friday night, the following Friday, there were several beers. The one after that was a bottle of spirit devolved, and it was a rapid trip back to daily drinking, a 6-month spree, which ended in me realizing that alcohol just had me. I couldn't go a day without drinking. I couldn't, I did ridiculous things. I tried to define good and bad drinking. So I told myself I only drink for good reasons. But it's amazing how many good reasons an alcoholic can find. A friend's having a baby or his pancake day. It didn't matter. And what really is my rock bottom, or my last drunk, was that I had a day where I genuinely had no good reason to drink. And so I let something trigger me, went off and drank anyway. But as I was taking the first drinks, I realized what I was doing. I couldn't even keep that one promise to myself. I wouldn't drink for bad reasons. And here I was doing exactly that. And first time in my life, I think, I left the bar without finishing my drinks because I'd lined a few up. I got home, the alcohol had started to kick in a little bit. I got myself to bed. I woke up the next day and I phoned a friend who I knew was in the program and I said, is there a local meeting? I think I need to go. And that was the start of my journey back into AA and coming into it and considering doing it properly, because I knew this time I didn't have a choice. I mean, I still white knuckled my first 28 days. And you asked about my rock bottom. So this is the rock bottom. 28 days sober. I wake up on a Sunday morning. I don't want to drink, but I know I'm going to. Foregone conclusion in my head. I'm going to go drink that day. I don't want to drink. Well, I'm going to do it anyway. That's against my will. This must be that mental obsession I've been hearing about in the rooms. Because I've been in the room 28 days, just it was Zoom mainly, no camera on, never raised my hand, never said anything, just listening. And so by then I had some phone numbers. I wasn't great at using them, and I have got a lot better. I also had some meeting IDs that were running. And so I logged on to one that was on 24/7. And within a few minutes of getting on it, the chair said, if there's anyone here today that's struggling, the best thing you can possibly do is raise your hand and introduce yourself. And I've never done that on that meeting. That day, 180 people on that meeting. I put my hand up. I nearly took it down lots of times because it's 5-minute shares. I got nearer the front. But you know what? I knew if I took my hand down, I was going to go drink. And I didn't want to drink. And for the first time, that to me was my rock bottom. I know a lot of people say all our rock bottoms are different. I don't believe that. I think the symptoms leading to our rock bottom are different. Our rock bottoms are the same. Our rock bottom, mine, for me, was when I put my hand up for the first time in that meeting and I said, I'm Andie, I'm an alcoholic. Please help, I can't do this on my own. And that help came. That help came. So that was really my rock bottom, was 28 days sober. When I knew that I couldn't do this on my own and I had to concede defeat and ask for help.
It sounds like you were a good white knuckler. And I say that as being someone who's also a good white knuckler, and it's the saddest thing to be good at. Let me sort of just say that right away. If you're a good white knuckler, I'm sorry for you. It's awful. It is terrible. And I spend years in that state just because I am, bloody minded. And I didn't realize how much help I needed. This was the first time when I stopped drinking and using in my sort of mid-20s. I'd run my life into the ground, and, I was just on pills and speed and amphetamines and crystal and whatnot all the time. And then, my mental health was shot to pieces, and I stopped by myself. I had this moment of realization and decided that, did I want to be this sort of drug addict loser, or did I want to become someone? Right? So new full self inserted successfully, right? And those years of white knuckling, right? It got better after a while, counseling, this, that, and the other, but those years of white knuckling were the worst. Honestly, it was in parts even worse than my active addiction, right? How did you experience your white knuckling, your dry drunkenness?
It wasn't fun. I knew I had to stop drinking. I was convinced that I was screwed by alcohol, but it totally had got me. And that much I could accept. But I went to my first AA meeting when I came back, and I saw the steps. And I thought, no way I can do that. No way. So luckily, people in the rooms told me, stick around, don't worry about any step you're not on, just keep showing up. So I did, because I felt I had no choice. And my white knuckling, it largely consisted of sitting in AA meetings a lot. In my early sobriety, that first month especially, I heard someone a couple of weeks in say something about trying to do 90 and 90. And I know that's not in the AA big book, and I know it's not. It comes from the US court system, and them noticing that people they sent for 90 days generally had more chance of getting better than those that didn't. I tend to tell people, get to as many meetings as you can. And that's what I did. In my first 3 months of sobriety, I thought, right, okay, 90 and 90, with Zoom as well. I mean, we've got no excuse, right? And I had a certain amount of time. And I also made decisions because I knew I had to get this. So I stopped watching Netflix. I stopped watching, and any spare time I had, I sat on meetings whether I wanted to be there or not. And that was what the white knuckling was like. By somehow leeching off the power that was in those rooms.
Leeching.
Yeah. But that's what we do, isn't it? I mean, it's lack of power is our dilemma. The sooner we get plugged into a power, the better. And at first, there is an element of you go and you feel the power that is in that room among those other people in recovery. And it was just very much my first 3 weeks of hell. It was, never mind a day at a time. At times it was an hour at a time, a minute at a time, clutching my 24-hour chip. And my 24-hour chip's got a grey spot where I rub the silver off. Just rubbing it,
Compulsion.
That was my thing, my little, can I get through another couple of minutes? And, and it was, sometimes I go, can I get through another 10 minutes? I don't know if I can. Well, can I do 5? I'll try and do 5. I believe I can do 5. I've done 5. Can I do another 5? Oh, I don't know. All right, we'll try doing another 2. All right, well, we've done 7 now. Now we're nearly at 10. Can we get a 10? And it was like that. It was horrible in the really early days. And there is a certain amount of willpower that is involved in that to get over the initial, because we're fighting this twofold thing at that stage. But we're still mainly dealing with the physical craving in the early stages. The interesting thing was when I got that point at 28 days that I told you about, the physical cravings had all gone. So I knew it was only the mental obsession, because I wasn't getting any of the effects what I did get a few tremors. I probably should have had a proper detox, but I didn't know better. But, I was lucky and I got through it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Andie. Our question 4 is, and you sort of alluded to it a little bit, and we're circling back, to those years leading up to what we were just talking about there. Our question 4 is, did you ever want to die? At your worst, did you consider suicide?
Yes. I had many times I considered it. And in actual fact, the thing that got me placed in the care of mental health was that I had decided at one point there was no point in living anymore. I wasn't giving anything to anybody, wasn't being of any benefit. I was living to drink, drinking to live. My family was sick of me. I wasn't, and I didn't like who I was. I hated myself. And I did plan my exit, and I was very meticulous about it. And I was also incredibly calm. It's a scary place to be. I was ready to go. Absolutely no qualms about it. And the things that stopped it happening that night were a series of what at the time I thought were really bizarre coincidences, because I was so careful in my planning. Ended up getting busted, so it couldn't happen. And so, yeah, my darkest I have been there. And I think when I actually came back to AA this time around, I remember coming in and going, all right, I'll try this for 90 days. And if it don't work, I can always kill myself. That was always plan B. Mm-hmm. I really didn't have any purpose. Didn't like who I was. I'd become an emotional bully of a bitch, and I had no redeeming features when I got to the rooms of AA. I often tell people I had nothing any of them would have wanted from me, but they had everything I wanted.
I'm quite sure that there were some redeeming features, even though we don't see them, Usually when we speak about this around question 4, I give some people might call it it's not a trigger warning because we're talking about it afterwards, but I do address those people who might just be in that space or close to that space. And I do always say, mm-hmm. Speak up, right? Speak up, talk to someone. Is there something that you would want to say apart from that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I know, I've been there where I didn't want to be here. That was it. End of my story. And all I can say is I was so wrong about so many things. I love my life today. I have an amazing life today. And, and if I die, I tell people all the time, if I'm gone tomorrow, don't mourn the fact I've gone, celebrate the fact it happened, because I've had a great time the last couple of years or so, and it does. It makes up for all those years I wasted. I'm having a great life today. I get to help others and be a service, and I have a relationship with a power that I never knew existed. And, so yeah, don't give up hope. It is worth living. I know it might not seem it at the time when you're in that mess, but there is a way out of the madness, and it isn't taking yourself out, and it's not in the bottom of a bottle or in a pill packet. It's in an old book, in my view, that was written years before I was born and is all about me.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andie. Our question 5 What other methods did you try to get sober before finding the rooms? If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
You know that there's a great list in the book that goes down all these things. I try nearly all of them. Yeah, I'll only drink beer. I'll only drink at weekends. I'll only drink for good reasons. I will. Yeah, I mean, just about everything. I tried all the controlled drinking things. None of that ever worked.
So sort of like start early, finish early, all those sort of things?
All of that stuff. Self-help books, how to control your drinking books, because as far as I was concerned, I had always fixed everything in my life with a book or a bit of therapy or study or whatever, except this alcohol thing. It just had me completely beat. I really did try just about everything I could have tried. I went to those group sessions, the ones that Hollywood take the mickey out of, where you sit around and a problem shared is a problem halved, and by the end of one of those meetings, I needed a drink. Wasn't going to help me get sober listening to other people's problems. I needed to get into somewhere that was talking about a solution, and that's what I found in the roots of AA.
I enjoy this question a lot because I'm always really interested and keen on hearing other people's refreshing brands of moderation, and it is still true though that self-help books and therapy and all these sort of things, they can be very helpful. They get a bad rep.
Yes.
In the rooms because they don't stop us drinking. But that doesn't mean that they're not helpful.
Absolutely. And we often tell people, there's lots of things you should seek outside help for. The 12-step program I'm in is very clear about that, and so, and I have sought outside help for other things that have come up along the way. We should absolutely do that. But I was only able to do that because I started to think clearly because I'd managed to put the drink down. So, yeah, I absolutely agree. Therapy and things, and look, even the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous tells me that if I'm talking to someone and they think they can do this some other way, to encourage them to try. Go try it your own way. And please, if it doesn't work, come back and we'll talk. And that's what the book tells me to do. I can't save people. I'm powerless over my alcoholism. I'm certainly powerless over everyone else's.
Absolutely.
So. Until they're ready and they want to try it this way, there's nothing I can do that's going to make them.
That's for sure. Question 6. Here you are, you've come into the rooms, not for the first time, but you have that, it's called the gift of desperation. It's called, it's the magic moment that we cannot bring about somehow, right? That magic moment of that realization of saying, I can't live like this anymore. That when we break, something breaks, that makes us open enough to kind of go, all right, I need something here, right? Something that isn't just me, right? I need other people. I need an outside help. For someone like me with all this bloody mindedness of mind, of course, that took quite a little while, sadly. I wish I'd gone into the program a couple of years earlier, if not more, right? Or even in my early 20s, but it took a long time. But here you are, you finally sort of, that moment has arrived and you've come back into the rooms and you described in such great detail, so vividly how you made it through those 28 days and, rubbing that newcomer chib and so on and so forth. And we're right there with you. So here you are, you're in those meetings. Our question 6 is, when you came in, did you struggle with the word God?
Yes, big time. When I arrived in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a militant atheist.
Wow.
And when I say militant atheist, I mean atheist of the worst kind. So, huge fan of Richard Dawkins. I still am an admirer of a lot of his work, by the way. But, and I was very well read. Mm. In other words, I've read the Bible. I have read it all the way through. I've read bits of the Quran. I've read books, various Buddhist texts, and I read religious texts so that I could argue with religious people. That's the kind of ego. And, I was an atheist. I was right, 100%. I'd absolutely ruled out the possibility of God. I had a childhood thing where I went to church for a while. I wasn't made to by my parents. That was something I did in rebellion in my teens. So I'd sort of come across that, and I think what my grandmother would have called throwing out the baby with the bathwater. in deciding, in the time I was in the Christian church, and I'm not knocking Christianity or any religion. It doesn't matter what your higher power is. It just matters you got one and it ain't you, right? So, but for me, they told me, read our big book, and I did, and it kind of unraveled for me. So I with that had ruled out any possibility of God's anything. So yeah, I remember walking that first meeting, seeing the steps and thinking, I'm screwed. I see higher power in God. And then I didn't step 4 and 5 to me was something straight out of the Catholic book of whatever. So I was like, this is just religion. This isn't for me. This isn't. But I was desperate. And people said to me, no, don't get hung up on any of it. Don't worry about it. It's a God of your own. Don't even pick any higher power you want. And I'm like, well, I don't want to pick any. Don't worry about that. You're not there yet. Worry about where you're at. And I'm really grateful for those people. The fact is, I saw in the rooms a possibility. These people were saying you could live happy, joyous, and free without alcohol. Didn't believe that was possible. So yeah, massive hang up about the word God. And the overcoming it came just by going through the steps. And you know, I've had a series of spiritual experiences along the way.
You must have been great fun down the pub, being so well read and being a militant atheist, you know, and you can talk anyone into the ground, you know, who sort of at the mere mention of anything, you know, half religious or half spiritual. That must have been really interesting.
I was horrible with it. I mean, I was like, on social media, if someone posted some very nice, God bless everyone, I'd be in there. Which God?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I just had to poke the bear and whatever I could do because I had to be right. That was me. The interesting thing today is I consider myself an Omnist, which means I think every religion is equally right. I'm probably equally wrong, but that's okay too. But the fact is, I've met people in this program from every faith, denomination, non-faith. I've got friends in the program that still maintain they are atheists, but they still manage to find a power break themselves they can rely on. So I'm now of the point, well, clearly it doesn't matter. I don't know what God is. I've given up trying to guess. My God's not the God of any religion. I know that much, but I don't know what God is. For my monkey brain to try and understand what God is futile. And I wasn't happy using the word God for a long time. You know, my first prayers in the program were very sarcastic things like, if there's anything there, and I don't think there is, please grant me the serenity. Because I was told, well, if you're willing to go to anything, you will pray. And I went, well, all right then. That's a fair point. I've just said I'll do anything, even if I think it's silly, I'll do it. So my first prayers were like that. They're really sarcastic, but I did get a bit of peace and serenity. And I hadn't felt that since I was a child. And I was like, okay, well, I'll keep praying it then. And it became higher power. I wasn't going to call it God. I had a huge hang up about using the word God. But as the big book tells us, it is a God of our understanding. And in the end, a bit later on, I just reached a point where I went, why am I fighting this? God's just a good descriptive word for whatever this thing is. And I don't know what it is. You know, if there was a big bang, what started it? If we're living in a simulation, who turned the computer on? I don't know, something greater than me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put there as well with the simulation. I like that a lot. I have often spoken about, you know, my first prayers on here, you know, and how awkward that was and how awkward it felt and so on. But the book, of course, is the famous phrase, isn't there, in the book, that God doesn't make too hard terms with those who earnestly seek him. So even if you're literally, this is not going to work, but I'm going to try, it will actually work. And I got a very similar thing out of it. I was more agnostic than atheist, to be fair, but that didn't really, that's neither here nor there. You're coming at it pretty much from an agnostic point of view, one way or another, I think.
I think everyone is, you know, and Bill's story really helped me. Because I love Bill. He called religious people crackpots, so that gelled with me right away. And it said that, you know, and he said even the people he followed, his intellectual heroes, the chemists of the time and everything, even they said that there must be something underlying it. And it was those things and that and also those questions that hit you like a bolt out of the blue when the time's right. Who are you to say there is no God? you know. And also something my first sponsor said to me one day when we were going through this, because I gave her a hard time about it. You know, I was like, yeah, you've got a chapter called We Agnostics, but you ain't got one called We Atheists.
Oh, you must have been such a fun sponsee, I tell you.
Yeah, this is where my ego was when I came in. You know, I really was so self-absorbed and so it was crazy. But in the end, she turned to me one day and she went, "Do you want to get well? Or is it more important for you to be right?" And I thought, yeah, I haven't been right about this in my whole life, have I? My best thinking got me drunk.
Yeah, that's right.
Luckily, my best thinking got me to AA. You know, so, and that was sort of a surrender thing where I went, okay, I'll do this higher power thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as we make our start, that's what I realise now. Doesn't matter where we make our start, like you said, God does not make too hard terms of those who seek God.
You said that, you know, you went through a series and you went through the steps, and that, you know, would produce, as it is supposed to, would produce a psychic shift, a spiritual experience, or more than one perhaps. And our question 7 is, how do you experience your higher power today? It's also a good place to share any God moments if you wanted to.
Sure. Wow. I mean, if somebody had told me 2 years, 8 months ago that I would have an amazing faith, belief, I talk with this thing all the time. It's that of, you know, the developing of constant contact with it. And I mean, it is a miracle. And I do see miracles all the time. And I've had, you know, and for me, the spiritual appendix in the back of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous explains it really well. For some people, it's light bulb moments. For some, it's educational variety. And I always said that for me, it was a mixture of those. I did have some little light bulb moments, but a lot of educational variety along the way. And my idea, and I mean, before we started today, we did the set aside prayer before we started recording. And I use that prayer all the time because I want to constantly have a new idea and that seems to be what's happening. My concept of whatever this God thing is has definitely changed over time. My relationship with it has got closer. It's just a thing of tremendous love. And then I get to give that away, you know, or lead people to their own idea of, you know, because no one has to believe my higher power. I don't have to know what anyone else's higher power is. That's what I love about this. So yeah, I'm blessed today. If I wake up in the morning and I start my day right with a bit of prayer and a bit of reading, and I seek my higher power in the things I've got to do for that day, and I do what it tells me to do in the book,
yeah,
I have a good day. Everything goes good. And that doesn't mean it's problem free. My life isn't problem free. I have the same problems I had before I got sober, but I don't drink on any of them today. I've got a way of dealing with them all, and I can deal with them all without it. You know, yeah, I have days when I feel a little bit down or a little bit, but I would take my worst day in sobriety over my best drinking day ever, every time.
Thank you so much. Our question 8, referring to the steps. Which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you? Let's take out step 1, which is always, if we think about it, the most difficult one for everybody, because nobody wants to get here.
Sure, and the only one we have to do perfectly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you?
Certainly steps 2 and 3. Coming to believe in a power greater than myself because of where I was at as a real hardcore atheist. And that been so much of my identity as well. And then once I'd come to think there might be something there a little bit greater than me, and anyone that is struggling with this, just remember, you only have to be willing to believe there might be something out there a little bit bigger than you. And if you really can't think of that there might be, go stand and just stare in the mirror for an hour. And if after that you can't think that somewhere out in the world is something more powerful than you, you might be beyond help.
But what is also true that at that point is that if you, by definition, if you can't find anything that is greater than you, then you are the greatest thing in this universe. Now, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure there must have been moments when I was high that, you know, I was thinking that. But, you know, in half a sober state, I would realize that I don't make it rain, I don't make the sun shine, there's a whole lot of things I don't do, So I always think of it in those terms as well, right? How much power do you actually have?
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you look around, it's a good entry point, I think.
And then I got really hung up on step 3, mainly because I overthought the hell out of it. Like, at the end of these steps are really simple, but us alkies really overcomplicate them. And I was sat there going, but how do you do that? Even though the book explains it perfectly, but I thought there had to be more. And how do I turn? I didn't know that I knew. And the crazy thing is, what I realize now looking back, I already knew how to turn my will and my life over to the care of something. I did it every time I picked up a drink. I put the care of my life into the hands of King Alcohol every time I took alcohol, and that didn't care about me or do anything good for me ever. All this is, and I realise this now, but I battled with it for a long time. All this is going, I'm going to turn the care of my will to something else. I don't even have to know what it is. I just know it's greater than me. And the proof that we've done it is that we do the next step. We crack on with the action. That's the proof we've made the decision. It is only making a decision. But I did, I know that the book goes, some of these we bought, and I often say, if the book was written specifically about me, it would say nearly all of these, you will, because I did balk at nearly all of them. But, and I think I was hesitant about my step 4 because I knew it involved telling someone else. I was more worried about, I think, honest. The only reason people delay their step 4 is it was about a 5. And what I learned along the process is they are freedom steps. I mean, I've never heard anyone in the room say, I did my 4 and 5 and it was dreadful. They always say, I went away, I felt amazing. And yet but I did. And then once I got past that, I think, and I got step 6, I sat on for a couple of weeks because I went, I'm not willing to give over. I thought if I gave over, everything was me, there'd be nothing left.
Yeah.
And where my sense of humor, if you tell, but as we find in step 7, the prayer is not that God takes everything. So God takes everything that stands in the way of our usefulness to others and whatever. Once I got past that, I think the remaining steps, although, 8 and 9 are the real work, I didn't find, because at that stage, so much had changed in my life and was getting better and better. And people said, you're only partway through the steps. If so I just pushed through. I did have a change of sponsor as well around that time, but, and I pushed through the remaining steps and I didn't really hesitate much at all on the last ones. By the time I got to 10 and 11, I was kind of doing them anyway without even realizing it. Good sponsorship will do that. You get introduced to all these things along the way. And then for me, I think I was at that point where I knew I'd been put in a position of neutrality where alcohol was concerned. You had to do this every day. And I said, but what's this rocketed thing? Because I don't feel that. I feel I'm on a higher plane. And then I started working with others. And honestly, it was like the booster rockets went off. So for me, honestly, the trickiest steps for me were 2 and 3 and probably 5 and 6.
Did you find that the light, quote unquote, went on around that time as well? Because that's certainly what happened to me, is after step 5 was the first time that I went to bed in the evening and I realized, I haven't thought about using.
I actually think my step 5 was the last time before the step 5. After that, I don't think I've ever had the compulsion to pick up alcohol since. That does not say alcohol hasn't popped in my head. Of course it does. But it's like the book says. I just go away. It's ridiculous. I recoil as if a hot flame. I know it's poison. It's not a problem. So, yeah, it's certainly around that 5th step. I always tell sponsees, these are don't delay them. They are the steps of freedom, I promise you. And everyone I've ever taken through this, after that step 5, exactly as it says in the book, they go away feeling delighted.
Yeah. That's true.
Lifted. And that is, and it's certainly with most not everyone, But most of the people I've taken through this, they have found that at step 5, that's where the compulsion has really gone, if it hasn't already.
I think it's because, amongst many other things, and let me also very quickly say, I don't know exactly how a miracle works. It's just observations that I've made with myself and with people that I've taken through the steps, or people who are close to me who are going through them. There is something in the catharsis, first and foremost, that, we just get rid of a whole lot of stuff and we look at it. But then, the experiential moment of speaking to someone else about it, putting it out there, which is where we relive a few things. And we also see how petty some of our resentments are and how much we have actually contributed. And the one thing I never wanted to look at, or never even wanted to believe existed, was my contribution, right, to those people and those situations and those things against which I had a resentment. I just didn't want to go there. I didn't want to admit that might even be a case that I contributed anything at all. So once you've done that, that is a big chunk of freedom that you're getting there. That's true. Well put. Thank you so much, Andie. Question 9. Which character defects give you most trouble? And if the word character defect, which rubbed me the wrong way for a long time because it sounds a bit evangelical, for lack of a better word, right? It's, I'm a Catholic, so I always think everything's my own fault, right? And so this would just be like, oh, see, we're just sort of self-flagellating because we're Catholics, oh, my defects, I'm a terrible person. So I went to this emotional sobriety workshop, which was a wonderful experience with Herb Kay of this parish and Dr. Alan Berger. And they prefer the words character default, which I really liked because it sort of takes away that sting for people who are a bit sort of, easily rubbed the wrong way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think by the time I got to the stage of writing these things out and thinking about them and going through it with a sponsor, my sponsor explained defects to me quite well. I do love that defaults idea though. And so I didn't, and by that stage, I think, I had them down. Like I say, there was a hesitancy because I was like, but if my wicked, horrible, evil, dark sense of humor gets taken away, because is that a defect? What I learned was it's not a defect. The way I use it was a defect, And so I still have that same dark sense of humor, but I am very aware of where and when I can use it. And it does get used for good. There have been times where that dark sense of humor has been the thing that snapped someone out of something so I can talk to them about alcoholism properly. And so, it's just been honed as what it's been. And so, that, again, that idea of default, because it wasn't the fact I had the thing, it was the way I used it. But I had lots. I had so many, because I was, by the time I got here, I really was not a nice person. I was so selfish, self-centered. I didn't care about anyone else. The only ones, I went back to my sponsor a little while ago, actually, and said, because I'd revisited, when you tackle the people through the steps, you tend to revisit them yourself, don't you? So I got out, pull out my defect list and look down it. Well, the great thing is, most of the things on there, like I can go, yeah, that is just about non-existent now. And then others are there, and you go, well, yeah, it's still there sometimes. And then I went, oh, well, there's a couple there that really don't seem to improve the law. Are they affecting my usefulness to others? I don't know, but there were a couple of things, like I'm not the most organised, I'm not the most tidy person. And I decided to talk to my sponsor about it, and well, you just got to pray for the willingness, haven't you, just like before. Right. Yeah, good point. So I started doing that every day, and sure enough, it's improving again. And so I'm like, okay, just need to. So I think those ones have been the hardest for me to deal with. But the beautiful thing about this program is that we don't. I hear people in the rooms go, I'm on my step 6, 7, so I'm working on my defects. That's not what it says. It says, pray for the willingness to come and then give it to God, and God takes them away. We go on and do our step A, which is, and then over time, those defects go. We don't take them away. They get lifted. And that has been largely my experience. There are some things that God will bring to our attention or whatever. And so you've got to change that, and you've got to change it. We've got brains. But on the whole, most of those things just went automatically. over time as I progressed and did the other steps.
And there's good reason, that there is a step 6, because in my initial state, or if I'm in self, I don't want anything removed. Thank you very much, right? I need to pray for it, right? I need to pray for wanting it, right? For the willingness. For once you kind of go, this is actually a problem, right? Whatever it is, anger, pride come to mind immediately for me, obviously. And I need to pray for them to be removed, because especially if I'm angry, that's the last thing that I want removed. It's my anger, right? There's a good reason for why it is in that order and why it has to be in that order. Thank you, Andie. Question 10. What is the best thing recovery has given you?
God, my life back. My life, everything. Like I say, I should be dead. Strokes, suicide, I should not be here today. So first of all, this program has absolutely saved my life. But not only that, it didn't just save it. Because if it had saved it and my life hadn't changed, I wouldn't have wanted to be here.
Still dry drunking it.
Yeah. But the fact is that I was told that if you work these steps to the best of your ability, life will get better. And then if you keep doing it, better will get better. And then better gets better again. And that has been the case. I know I can't let up on this. I have to work this every day. But why would I want to now? I'm now at a point where, it's funny, when I first came into AA, they said, the only thing you need is a desire to stop drinking. I didn't have that. I had a desire to stop the damage. Didn't really have a desire to stop the drinking. And today I don't have a desire to stop, but I do have a desire to never start again, because I can't ever go back to that life the way it was. My relationships, and not all my relationships have been restored. I'm still estranged from a teenage daughter, doesn't want anything to do with me, and that's, but I've got peace and acceptance in that situation now. My side of the road is as clean as it can be, done all that I can do and all I'm asked to do. But my other relationships, I've got an older daughter, grown-up adult daughter. My relationship with her is amazing now. Relationship with my brother, my mum and my dad who are still with us. Just all of those things, like more than just restored, they're better than they were before by a long, long way. And it's strange now because I'm now the voice of reason in the family.
Go figure. Question 11. We sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, but let's go into it just one more time for a second here. Our question 11 is, what would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict?
The first thing I say is, like, one of the most important things in this is working out if you are, right? Are you? And so in the case of alcoholism, which is mine, because I'm pretty much a specialist. I tried some other things, but they never did that much for me, like how they were easy for me to walk away from. Alcohol was not, that wasn't the case with. And when I got here, you had a problem with drinking. And I thought, well, maybe I'm an alcoholic, but I didn't even know what an alcoholic was. Didn't know what was meant by that in these rooms. And so I was encouraged to stick around and find out if I was an alcoholic of the type you guys were talking about. So I just listened intently, and I found that I had similarities with a lot of people. Someone took me through the doctor's opinion, and that helped me. And so I think that, we have a step before the steps where it says the first step in recovery is conceding to our innermost self that we are an alcoholic. Mm. And that's the first step in recovery. It's not the first of the 12, because I think the power of the first step is different. And that conceding to yourself, are you really an alcoholic? And also to point out that if you are, it's not your fault. This is an indiscriminate disease. It doesn't care. Like, I don't come from a long line of alkies. I know some people do, but my parents aren't alcoholic. My grown-up adult daughter, thank goodness, is not an alcoholic. None of them were. I am. It's indiscriminate. But if you've got diagnosed with anything else, you'd probably get a lot more sympathy if it was cancer, if it was...
Oh, God, yeah.
But this is a disease that we have to diagnose ourselves, which is,
odd,
weird. And it's not only that, it's the only disease I know that is doing everything it can to convince you ain't got it. But if you stick around the rooms and you read the book, you will identify it. And if you are, okay, the fact it's a disease lets us off a bit, right? But now we know it is our responsibility to do something about it. If you were diagnosed with cancer, it would be your responsibility to turn up for all the chemo and whatever you needed. If you were diagnosed with diabetes, you'd have to do whatever you have to do for that. With this, the beauty of it is it's a spiritual medicine, which was, bizarre to me when I got here.
Yeah.
But it really is. And it's not, we are so lucky. I do call myself a very grateful alcoholic today. When I got here, I didn't understand that. People call themselves grateful. I was like, you just told me I've got an incurable disease? Are you mental? But I get it now because they knew there was a solution. And having been through that solution, I'd never have done these steps unless I absolutely had to, right? There's no way. So I'm really glad that out of all the diseases and illnesses I could have got, that this is the one I've got.
Yeah.
So if you're new, stick around and work out, are you an alky type? And if you are, if it's an alcoholic, if you're a drug addict in whatever program, get yourself a sponsor in that program, someone that's been through the steps and had the spiritual experience, and get them to guide you through it using the correct literature. And you too will have something called a spiritual experience. And like the appendix in the back of the AA book says, that's different for everyone, but you will have one. So yeah, if you're new, just stick around long enough to at least find out if you are an alcoholic is the first thing to do. Because I didn't do that when I was 23, and that cost me the best part of a quarter of a century of my life to drinkers.
Snap, pretty much exactly the same thing for me. Absolutely. Wish I had done it when I think I stopped using when I was 24 at the time, and I really needed a program. Our last question for today, Andie, is our question 12. What do you want your higher power to say to you, quote unquote, at the pearly gates?
That's a good question. I don't think words would even cut it. I just think if there's a moment we meet the maker or whatever, I just think it's just going to be a giant hug that I want. That's all I really want. This life has been a journey and is a journey and continues to be. And I screwed up a lot of it, but along the way I found my way back, and I found my way to my true purpose. And I have a purpose today, and I have that. And I just think when I get there, just to know that I got some of it right towards the end will be enough for me.
That's really, really wonderful and really profound. Thank you so much. Andie, you've been an absolute delight today. It's been such fun. I think the highlight must be Pancake Day as a good reason for drinking. That was certainly one of my highlights. It was a very pet-friendly episode. We are quite glad that we had Skittles with us today as well. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on 12 Steps and 12 Questions. Thank you so much.
We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe. While this pod is based on the 12-Step Recovery Program, it's not officially affiliated with any 12-Step fellowship. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, it's fully self-supporting and not-for-profit. And this next bit. It's not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, and it neither endorses nor opposes any causes.